Hi everybody, Martin here. I just wanted to give you an introduction to the module, um, mainly because this is different to the modules that you've already studied um, over your time with Staffs Uni, in terms of it being slightly less structured and I suppose um, more geared towards you organising your own time rather than us having a week by week progression. Having said that, the first 6 weeks are driven by a week by week progression just to get you started. But after that point, it is really about you working with your supervisor to arrive at the best possible project and to also write the best possible thesis that you possibly can. So I wanted to just go through some Blackboard content to give you an idea of what the module looks like and how it's going to function. So I guess it makes sense to start with this um, key module information aspect that you'll see in Blackboard. Now, one of the really important documents is the dissertation timeline document. So it's going to open this up. So for you guys, for the full-time students, we obviously have some key deadlines, some key dates to be aware of. So if we look at the look at the top, we have when the module starts, we have when the dissertation workshop is. So recording this video in 2018, so for 2019 the dates will be slightly different, so make sure you're kind of up to date with the announcements going on the courses to understand when the dates are. And then it kind of gives you a flow of when certain things need to happen. Okay, so module start, we have some dissertation workshop content, we have the submission of your research proposal in the ethics form, then we have feedback of those ethical decisions and your grade for that proposal coming back to you, and then it splits into two. If we go left, this is where you've failed the proposal or the ethics element or both, and you need to resubmit by a certain date, and then we turn the feedback around relatively quickly to make sure you're on your way to doing your thesis. If we go to the right, this means that you pass the proposal and you pass the ethical application. What I would say is it's very rare to pass the ethical application first time. You will usually need to make some amendments and some tweaks to it to make sure that you're meeting those ethical standards. That's completely normal. So don't worry too much if you have to make some tweaks. That's probably the typical thing that would happen. And then we all come back in to the middle. We have your submission of your thesis, your final thesis, and then about a month later you have your dissertation viva. So I'll talk in more detail about those aspects for now, but certainly this document is a really important document to get your head around, and as I say, will be specific for your year. So don't pay too much attention to the dates on the document. It's more about the essence of what the document is telling you at this point. The next really important document is this MSc dissertation handbook. So this is kind of lays out exactly what's required for the dissertation as a whole. So it's quite a detailed document over about 30 pages. So best approach to this is to download it and just go through it in detail. Have a read through once, go back to bits that you need a bit more detail around. Make sure you understand what the process is and what the expectations are. So in this we talk about the structure of the module, we talk a little bit about the 2-day workshops. We have some recommendations for getting started and how to write the dissertation proposal and what that's all about, including ethical information and what those outcomes might be. And then we move on to the dissertation as a whole. So once your proposal's been signed off and your ethics has been signed off, we're into the dissertation. This is you running a project, collecting data, analysing the data, and writing up the thesis. When you're doing your thesis, you're really working in collaboration with your supervisor. Even though it is your project and you're driving it and leading it and driving that timetable of events, you're collaborating with your supervisor and they're providing you feedback and one-to-one support around how to do the best possible piece of research that you can. And I think it's more realistic to see it as a collaboration rather than just you out on your own doing this work, which would be different to the other assignments that you've completed on the MSc. Your proposal is more of an independent piece of work, that's for sure. and your Viva is definitely very independent. But the thesis in general will feel more collaborative than it has in the past. Okay, so you produce your thesis. We ask you to submit an electronic copy to Blackboard as you would normally, and also 2 physical copies, and we'll use those physical copies to mark and also to help with the Viva when you come in and get Vivaed towards the back end of the module. So we move on to the Viva, the oral defence. So this is where you give a 20-minute presentation, and then after that we ask you around 30 minutes worth of questions about your project and what you did and why you did it. Nothing to be feared too much. It's a bit different to how you would imagine a PhD Viva, where it's kind of a bit more of a grilling. This is more of a conversation about the work that you've done. So most students actually enjoy this experience and take a lot from it. So, as I say, go through this document, get as much information as you possibly can. It's 30 pages worth of stuff, and included within it is potential structure for your dissertation and ideas around how to write it up and academic style and stuff like that. So, a really important document for you to get your heads around there. The rest of the aspects are again more guidance and advice around how to use discussion boards, the extenuating circumstances, policies and things like that. The other aspects that I wanted to draw your attention to, there's 2 different things I want to talk about now. The first is the assessment information submission. So there's 3 assessments on this module. You have your proposal and ethical submission that I've talked about. You have your actual thesis, your actual dissertation, and you have your Viva examination. So 3 pieces of assessment. Your proposal is obviously the first thing that you need to submit, and that's worth 10% of the overall grade. With the proposal, you'll see familiar things as you would in the other assignments. We have some, an assignment guide, a place for you to actually submit the thing, which is obviously really important. But also, really importantly for this submission, there's a very structured form that we need you to use. And this is the full ethical review form, so I'm going to open this up here so I can show you it. So this is different to what you would have done before. So what we want you to do is add the front sheet to this, and then we want you to complete the assignment on this form. As you can see, it needs personal information and tick boxes and things. But then we're into the project outline and also the specific methodological aspects that we need you to do to get ethical approval. So go through that in detail, be working in collaboration with your supervisors to make sure you've got all the bits and pieces in place to do this. As I say, we're marking this from an academic perspective. It's obviously worth 10% of your grade, but additionally we're also assessing it for ethics, and it's worth bearing those 2 things in mind. So you need to be watertight with your ethics to make sure you get it approved, but you also need to be watertight with your academic skills to make sure you try to get the full 10% of the grade. And this will look different for all of you because you'll all be doing different projects. So there's no, I suppose, best practice standard I can send you. All I can do is kind of stress to you the importance of hitting each of these points and doing it in as much detail as you possibly can. So include references, include APA style as you would normally, but structure it within this form. Okay. And again, we have specific grading criteria for that, so that's important. And also things like sample consent forms, which you'll need to include in your ethics assessment. We have risk assessment information, so if you're working with human participants, you will need to have some risk assessment because there's always some risks associated with doing research. So again, doing that risk assessment form in as much detail as possible, and then we have details here for you to send it to the technicians here to get that signed off before you submit your proposal. So that's another important aspect to bear in mind. So once you've completed the form, you've done your best to make sure that it's all ethical, you've done your risk assessment, we will then mark your work, ethically assess it, and then provide you some feedback. Usually you'll have to make some tweaks on your ethics to make sure you can collect your data, and then after that it's on to the dissertation. So the dissertation is assessment 2, and this is an 8,000 word piece of work, piece of research that you should write in the style of a journal. So what we're asking you to do is select a journal that you would like to write for. We're not asking you to actually submit it to that journal. We just want you to use the guidelines and try to use that 8,000 word limit. And produce a piece of research, whether it's qualitative, quantitative. It might be a piece of review work. There's really very few limitations on what you could do in this project. We have some specific guidelines, as you would expect, but really all of your different projects will look different. It really depends on what kind of project you've chosen to do. But we do have some specific grading criteria for Viva for essay work, and there's very little guidance we can give you on certain aspects. There is a lot in the module handbook, to be honest, around structure, but this is about working with your supervisor and looking at the guidelines for the journal that you've used and writing it in that style. That's really the key there. And then, as before, we have a submission points. We want you to submit an electronic version and also 2 physical versions. Okay, we have some examples of articles that have been submitted before in APA format to give you an idea of what they should look like. And then your third assessment is the Viva. So this is where you'll come into university, or if you're abroad, you can attend via Skype, and it will be you, it will be your supervisor, and it will be an additional assessor, and you'll give a 20-minute presentation about your work, and then we'll ask you some questions for 30 minutes. And this is worth 20% of the overall mark, so a decent chunk of your grade is going towards this. We have some assessment details and some guidelines around this. When I go to the module content, there's also some aspects around presentation style. But as the module progresses, I'll fill up this oral exam schedule. But I'll be contacting you to make sure you can do certain times and dates anyway. So that's really important to make sure you can actually do that date. And then involves you travelling down, or if you're abroad, Skyping at a certain time. Then I would block off about an hour for that. Typically it's 50 minutes, but yeah, block off an hour. And then we just want you to submit your presentation slides to us before the event, just for external examination reasons, and also to make sure we've got a copy of your presentation before you actually undertake the assessment. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the module content. So we have sort of 6 weeks of structured content, and as I said before, after that 6 weeks it's really up to you to devise your own timetable and schedule. But within these folders, we're kind of taking you through or guiding you through the process of starting a research project. So we have this idea of developing that research proposal and what you might need to think about there. We have some presentation skills guidelines for that 10-minute presentation we're asking you to give at the workshop coming soon. And then different advances in quantitative and qualitative research, just bring you up to speed with some of the more recent aspects. Then we'll include some detail around the workshop that you'll hopefully be able to attend, and then some important information about ethics. And this content will include some video content from me, and some audio content, some podcasts, and some documentation to guide you through. An additional aspect is we do have the discussion board as usual. You will notice that this will be less vibrant than normal because we're not doing week by week tasks to ask you to do. This is really for you to just chip in any thoughts, comments, questions you've got, and I'll keep on top of that to make sure I'm answering all the questions I possibly can. But as I say, everything will look different to each of you, so some of these will be specific to individuals, and that's fine. So it's not a requirement you keep checking discussion boards like it would be on previous modules. Okay, so I think that's about it from me. As usual, fire any questions at me. You can get me on email or put them in the discussion board, and as soon as you have your supervisor, as soon as that arrangement's in place, then they're really your go-to person for this module over the coming weeks.